Hey, what you doing?
Making pancakes.
Oh, just regular old pancakes. Is that all?
Not just all. There's dozens of different kinds of pancakes that you can make.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No, in the 18th century there were all kinds of pancakes, like the ones I'm making here, which are cream pancakes. You had rice pancakes. You have pancakes fried without lard. You have sweet pancakes. You have savory pancakes. You can go all over the place with these pancakes.
You're kidding me.
No.
Never heard of such a thing. So what kind are these again?
They're called cream pancakes because their base is cream. Most pancakes have very little milk or cream in them. This is actually 2 cups of cream, or in my case milk because I ran out of cream, that I put with 2 eggs.
What else goes in them? What's some of the measurements? If I want to make these at home, how would I do that?
Well, you start out with 2 eggs and you can beat them up just a little bit. Then you add to it 2 cups of milk or cream. It's supposed to be cream, but I ran out of cream. So you can use any type of milk product. You can use cream, you can use whipping cream. If you can't have dairy, use an alternative, whatever you use, but the measurement needs to stay the same, 2 cups.
Gotcha.
To that, you need to add a 1/4 cup of sugar, about a teaspoon to teaspoon and a half of cinnamon. It depends on if you like cinnamon. Everyone in my house loves it, so I go heavy on the cinnamon.
I see.
And about a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. It's not an 18th century recipe unless you have the nutmeg.
Oh, really? Why is that?
It was a very popular, easy to get spice in the 18th century, and so they would use it in everything, literally everything.
I see.
Now, if you don't have either, or you don't like either, use any spices you want. You can think Christmas spices, because those were very popular in the 18th century, and they used them in savory dishes. You can find pot roast made with allspice and ginger and that kind of stuff put in it. Or if you want to have a more savory kind of pancake, by all means put some cayenne in it. That was a very popular 18th century spice. And then you could make it a more savory pancake.
What do you mean exactly by savory?
Savory is, it doesn't taste as sweet. It tends to be less sweet. You think less dessert with it.
I see.
Now, and then into this you want to add a 1.5 cups of flour. Now, I cannot tell you if you have to use a gluten-free flour, how well it will work. You'll have to kind of play with it to see how well it mixes. Now, if you're going to make these at home, you have to understand they're not going to be your regular fluffy, puffy pancake that everybody absolutely loves on a Saturday morning, covered in syrup and butter. These are going to be more like a crepe, very, very, very thin.
I see.
And you want that, and that's perfectly fine. See, in the 18th century, they didn't have things like baking soda or baking powder. That didn't come around until 1820. So instead you had to do one of 2 things: yeast or air. Yeast was usually made out of something called barm, which is the foamy top part of beer, ale, rum, that kind of bit, and you would go to your local brewer and collect it, and then you would let it sit and you would use it to like regular yeast. Or you would sit here for an hour and mix it and mix it and mix it and mix it, which...
For a full hour.
For an hour. I've had to do it for a cake. Okay, I didn't do it for a cake. I had some willing helpers do it for a cake for an hour. Well, I did other things, but it was the best cake I've ever had. They literally sat and mixed it for an hour, and it literally went from about that flat. The dough literally grew with the air that they put into it. And so that's how you would have to do something like this.
So it's a good job for children.
Exactly. Parents, if you need something to keep your kids busy, make a pound cake. Now, when you make 18th century pancake batter, it tends to be very lumpy. You will never get all the lumps out, but part of that you want to do is then you will take this, and you will set it off to the side for the next 2 hours. And after those 2 hours, you'll come back and you will be able to mix the batter again, because the liquid in the batter has soaked into all the lumps, and the lumps have actually started to relax, and you can beat it one more time, and most of the lumps will come out, but not all of them, but that's fine. You want a few lumps, it won't hurt it, so we'll just let this sit for 2 hours.
Where would you find such a recipe like this? I mean, are they just laying around, or what? Where did you find this recipe from the 1700s?
I actually found it in a cookbook. You can find the cookbooks online. Breaking 18th century barriers here. You get on something like Google Books and you can actually look up 18th century cookbooks. I would start with Hannah Glass's New and Easy Cookbook. You find hers, and a lot of times at the bottom they'll have suggestions of other cookbooks. And it can very quickly become a rabbit hole because you click on one and you find another and another and another and another. I currently have, I stopped counting at 90 different cookbooks. A lot of them are first prints. I do have most of Hannah Glass's reprints because each cookbook will have a different set of recipes in it. The early 18th century cookbooks tend to be more towards the French cooking during the French and Indian War, which is 1754, I believe, to 1760 something. It was more towards the English, and you will find more English-based recipes, more English-based cookbooks. And then when we started the American Revolution and afterwards, we wanted to be all American, and you will see more of the cookbooks going and using more things like cranberries, cornmeal, venison, turkey, more of what you would find around here. So all you have to do is do some digging. If you want cookbooks, go to John Townsend's website, Townsend & Sons. I think it's still Townsend & Sons, I'm not sure. They sell cookbooks. You can start your cookbook collection there. Again, Google Books is great because a lot of them are free.
Okay.
And you can go through them and find them. And this one actually comes from the English Art of Cookery by, I believe it is Richard Briggs, 1780-ish. There were so many prints, and some of them were printed 2 years right after the other, so sometimes it's kind of hard to keep up with which print is which print.
So if I would get one of these cookbooks, because if I want to cook along with you what you're doing, and I get one of these cookbooks, I could just use any of the same old ingredients out of my fridge, like the eggs and all that. They were all the same and everything like that.
Not necessarily. You need to read the recipe and try and see if it is. There are some recipes like barm. It's just easier to use regular yeast, and when you do something like that, I consider barm to be the yeast mixed with about a cup of water. I usually go 3 tablespoons of yeast to a cup of water, and that's my measurement of barm. And if it says 2 spoonfuls, I take 2 spoonfuls out of that. I've just learned that's an easy way to do it. A lot of the recipes are massive amounts, so you need to read the recipes, see how much they're asking you to make, and decide exactly how much. I do a shortbread recipe that calls for 4 bushels of flour and 4 pounds of butter. I cut it back by a quarter, and I still have 4 pans of shortbread sitting around the house, and it lasts, but you kind of get tired of shortbread after a while.
I understand that. So it's not necessarily tit for tat, so it's not like a pound is a pound the world over.
No, and you have to be careful. I have some handwritten Scottish cookbooks from the early 18th century, mid-18th century, and you have to understand in Great Britain and Scotland, pounds were different. You could get 4 pounds Scotch weight of butter, but that equaled 3 pounds British weight. The same thing with flour and milk. It depended on where you were at, and you have to be very careful because sometimes they'll say, butter the size of an egg. What's the size of an egg? Because their eggs were smaller than what we have today. And they had different kinds of eggs. You had duck, you had goose, you had chicken. So you have to try and figure out what would be the best measurement for this recipe. If you know how to make cookies, and it happens to be cookies are what they called biscuits at the time, you know that most cookie recipes need about a half a cup of butter. You start with that because you already know the modern measurement for a cookie. You try it. Sometimes it works, and then sometimes it fails spectacularly. And you start over again, and you find that, okay, it needs more butter, so you throw in more, or it definitely needs cut back. Size of an egg means small, so you go smaller. You just gotta kind of play with it. There are sometimes the fails actually work better than the real recipes.
Oh, interesting. So, you say this has to sit for how long now?
2 hours.
So
or about 2 hours.
So, if I come back in 2 hours, I get to try some pancakes?
Are you dressed in the 18th century fashion, or are you dressed weird?
I'm just happy I'm dressed.
So am I. If you're an 18th century reenactor, you can have as many pancakes as you wish that I can make. But if you're not a reenactor, no.
Oh, well, I'll see what I can do in the meantime. How's that?
That works for me.
Alrighty. I'll be back in 2 hours.